Middle East and Africa Forum for Sustainability Leaders podcast series, a series dedicated to those who have the sustainability word in their job titles and are tasked with steering the sustainability strategies and commitments of their organizations. I'm pleased to welcome today's featured guest speaker, Rohan Chopra, Regional Director of Sustainability at Johnson Controls. Welcome, Rohan.
Thank you, Ignacy. Glad to be here.
And Rohan, I'd like to kick off this conversation by asking you about your role of regional director of sustainability at Johnson Controls here in the Middle East. I want to ask, how was this position firstly identified? What was the need to come up with that role?
Got it. Before I answer, I'll give you a quick overview of the organization, and that will lead up to getting to your question of why there was a need. So Johnson Controls is a 138-year-old organization, so there's a huge legacy that we carry, and we are a leader in smart, sustainable, and healthy built environment space. Sustainability is something that has been core to our business for a very long time. And like I said, it goes back over 100 years. In fact, we published our first sustainability report way back in 2003. So that's how early we started with our sustainability journey. We were one of the first ones to join the EPA Climate Leaders Program in the US in 2004. So the topic has been important for Johnson Controls as an organization for a long time. It has gained public attention in the last few years, of course, because of the climate change that we are seeing all around us, because of the evolution of ESG, sustainability all around us. But as an organization, we have been very serious about this topic for a long time. In 2021, recently, we communicated our net zero ambitions. So we communicated to the world that we want to be net zero for our scope 1 and 2 emissions till 2040. And we further broke it down into smaller milestones. And we even have science-based targets approved for 2030, which is we want to optimize our scope 1 and 2 emissions by 55% till 2030 and reduce our scope 3 emissions by 16% by 2030. So the official commitments came in 21. The philosophy of sustainability has been there for a long time. And just to give you an idea about the scale of the organization, we are present in 150 countries, have over 2,000 locations that are served by our operations. So just the magnitude of our presence globally made sustainability or the implementation of sustainability a huge ask across the organization. And hence, there was always a need to follow a very structured approach across the globe, across different regions that the organization is split into. And hence, my role had come up. So just because of the volume of the organization, and I think it would be true for most big multinational organizations, you need to drill down and have structured organization structure to implement decarbonization and sustainability across the organization. And also because scope 3 is a big component for us. It is way higher than scope 1 and 2. And the category of use of our products is what is one of the biggest emitters of CO2 for us, which falls under scope 3.
Which points exactly? Which are the main emitting points of those scope 3 emissions?
Correct. So, like I mentioned in the beginning, we are primarily a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning solution provider, which makes the building smart, sustainable, and healthy. Like I said, we are big in the fire and security domain as well. So, and when you talk about air conditioning and when you talk about Middle East, this is an obvious environment where a lot of cooling is needed, which adds a lot to our scope 3 emissions because it's our products that are going in. So Middle East has always been an important region for the organization. From a sustainability perspective, also it is a very important region for the organization. And something that is scope 3 for me is probably a scope 1 or scope 2 for another organization. So it became imperative for Johnson Controls to formulate this sustainable infrastructure. We call it sustainable infrastructure internally.
And on that point of the Middle East, you mentioned obviously for obvious reasons that the temperatures here, AC is a must, but also the real estate, construction sectors are important sectors to the region's economies. Have you seen an uptake in the sustainability space in the construction space, in the sense that was it somewhere that was already established, that something that developers were taking in mind at the time of launching new projects, or are they starting to become more conscious about such issues over the last few years?
So I've been in this region for about 7 years now, a little over 7 years. I've seen a dramatic change in the adoption of this topic on the whole. Initially, it was a typical consulting contracting market where not too much attention was paid towards the green or the sustainability angle. But the last couple of years, and once UAE makes up its mind, once the region makes up its mind, things move pretty fast. So I've seen a dramatic change in the last couple of years where, from a new construction perspective, a lot of importance is being given to the design of the building itself, to the kind of material that goes in during the construction, to the kind of equipment, the systems that go in. But there is, so that's how, as far as the green building or the new building stock is concerned. But there is a lot of existing building stock in UAE, which you can see around you or in this region, which was not designed with that intent of sustainability at the beginning. But there is a huge scope of decarbonizing that sector as well of the existing building stock, which is where people like me in Johnson Controls are also trying to support other private organizations in the market to optimize their emissions. So that's how I got here. That's how Johnson Controls started this sustainability department in the region.
That's an interesting point, right? Like there are so many buildings in the region, maybe that they were built with a different idea, different concept in mind. Maybe the sustainability part wasn't as present back in the day, but now we see, as you mentioned, all the countries in the region, the UAE announcing the sustainability year, the year of sustainability in 2023, in preparation for COP28 by the fall of the year. Seeing Saudi Arabia launching their own green initiative, as well as their own net zero targets. So all of a sudden, this becomes a priority in the region, and as you say, like things can move forward once the governments make their mind and set their goals. So in that sense, what about those old buildings that were not they did not have this idea of concept of sustainability back in the day? Can you see more demand in the sense of readapting those buildings, or of upgrading them to make them, for example, more energy efficient in the HVAC?
Absolutely. The demand is growing. Like I said, 7 years back, if I were to have this discussion with a building operator or a building developer, this topic would be the last topic on the priority list or on the discussion list with the real estate developers. But now that landscape is changing pretty quickly. Especially because there is a business angle to it as well. Of course, everybody wants to be environment friendly, but people have started realizing that all these energy efficiency measures and solutions actually help improve the bottom line of these businesses, because everybody's paying for energy, everybody's paying for electricity, water, fuel that goes in running a building itself. So whatever optimization that can be done in these domains actually benefits the bottom line of an organization, because you're reducing the operating cost, which directly impacts the profit margin. So we have seen this all around us. In fact, Johnson Controls has been a leader in this. We have, I think globally, we have committed numbers of around $7 billion plus in energy savings that we have committed to other organizations, which is, in terms of CO2, it is probably about 37 million tons of CO2 that we are saving from an environment perspective. But like I said, people are getting more and more awareness about this topic, and it is becoming a reality.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about the way Johnson Controls operates from an organizational standpoint. So you have the global headquarters, a global team with a CSO in place, a global head of sustainability, and I'd like to ask you about the regional word in your job title. How does that? How does Johnson Controls, a large multinational company, uh, operate in the sustainability space? Do you have like a global team that sets the guidelines, and then you have the regional heads of sustainability that that adapt those to their specific parts where they're working on?
Absolutely. So we are headquartered out of the US, and all these sustainability related discussions uh, most mostly start from the US because they've been way ahead in measuring the impact of climate change across the world. So yes, we have a corporate structure where we have our global chief sustainability officer uh, who leads these kind of initiatives and these kind of strategies internally within the organization. And then we are divided into three regions from a business perspective. We have the Americas, we have Europe, Middle East, and Latin America, and then we have APAC, which is Asia Pacific. So whatever is strategized or decided at the top, of course, flows down in a very structured manner to the respective regions. So the strategy is consistent, the end goal is consistent, but the deployment of strategy or the deployment of the initiatives have to be tailored to the regional parameters. Every region, every country has their own regulatory frameworks. Somewhere the mandates are stringent, somewhere I mean, like for us in our region, right now there are not enough mandates which make it very strict for organizations to work on it. It's more voluntary. It might change soon enough. So we follow a structured approach from the global chief sustainability officer, flows down to the regions. But like I said, the deployment depends on the regulatory framework of each country, each region.
And at the time of executing those sort of guidelines, have you encountered any obstacle in order to stick to them, or maybe there's something specific about the region or some of the markets where you operate where it's more complicated to follow to the letter all those global.
Not really. It is just so, like I said, the end goal is to be, say, net zero or reduce your carbon emissions by X percentage. How you do it, it could be maybe in the US or in this region, renewables are a big part of implementing that strategy. Maybe in Europe or somewhere else in APAC, there would be another strategy that would be followed to implement that. So there are certain challenges to adopt what the headquarters is thinking to the regional perspective. But I mean, the organization has been here long enough to understand the market dynamics, to understand the regulatory framework around us. So we don't see it as a challenge. It's just you have to be agile and adapt to the requirements of the land.
And you mentioned that Johnson Controls launched their first sustainability report back in 2003, and how has the sustainability approach or strategy evolved over the last 20 years?
Oh, by leaps and bounds. Initially, it was, I mean, we were, of course, because our operations are primarily out of the US, so a lot of focus was based on our operations in the US. But then we have been growing as well in the last 20 years. And I mean, you can't be net zero without considering your growth plans as well. So we have to, like I said, we have always been agile. There has been a lot of focus that has been spent by the board of the organization. And I link it to something that you mentioned before. ESG and sustainability are topics which are which have moved beyond just image building for an organization. These have become very, very serious topics. And because Johnson Controls was an early adopter to this topic, it has been a little easier for us to move ahead in this aspect. So it drives right from our board of directors who run the organization. There is an executive committee, which is chaired by our CEO and chairman. So these topics are reviewed and monitored very strictly at that level. And then there are lower down ESG leadership committees, and then there are different environment, social governance kind of pillars that we have within the organization. So we've been following a very structured approach. Being early in this race has always helped us, and I think we are moving pretty well in our journey. We have already, so like I said, in the last 20 years, we've done a lot, to your point, starting from 2003. So we have, like I mentioned, we have a target of 55% reduction till 2030. We have already achieved 42% in our scope 1 and 2 emissions reduction till date, and we still have 7 years to go. So it's probably we'll overachieve what we had committed. But the point is that a lot has happened in the last 20 years. The focus has increased globally rather than just in one region. There have been opportunities that have come across the organization, and I think we are pretty stable in that sense.
You mentioned there were teams in the organization that are responsible for steering the ESG strategy and objectives. I'd like to focus on the concept of ESG because it seems to have emerged over the last few years as the latest development in corporate sustainability. Were those those sort of departments already there before in place, or is something that has come up as a new role? How has that impacted?
It has grown over the years, to be honest. I mean, I always used to say CSR was a trend at some time where corporate social responsibility was a big trend that corporates were following a few years back. ESG is a more recent trend, but ESG is basically a measure of how an organization's existence impacts the world it operates in. How does an organization impact its employees, its customers, its suppliers, its partners? So it is, like I said at the beginning, it is moving beyond just an image building exercise. It is an actual financial matrix for an organization. All the investors, financing arms in the world are weighing ESG very heavily in their checklist. There are more and more regulatory frameworks that are coming in, compliance regulations that are coming in for ESG. And that is why the visibility of this topic at the board level is what is needed in most organizations to drive it. It is very easy to say, okay, we need a sustainability team, we need a ESG team, but you need to understand the gravity of the subject itself to make the right decisions, to form the right structures in the organization. And JCI, like I said, starts at the board. There is an executive committee, which is headed by the CEO. There is an ESG leadership committee, which has multiple business arms related to it. And all of our executive committee members, which are basically leaders from different business units, because eventually everybody has to run a business, have sustainability as a part of their evaluation. So we link sustainability to our leaders' KPIs and performance evaluation as well. So that's the seriousness that Johnson Controls is taking on this topic.
So the sustainability part has sort of trickled down across the entire organization, just saying in the form of objectives of KPIs. What about? I'd like to ask about that part specifically. The more in the sense of have you noticed that there's been a buy-in by other departments of the organizations at a more cultural level in the sense of what can we do from our respective roles to advance in our sustainability goals? Absolutely.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It is for me and the organization realizes this now as well. It is more of a culture thing than just one person or one department driving this. It is sustainability is a way of living now. It's a way of operating in a day-to-day scenario. So it can't be just one sustainability leader driving the entire organization. It has to be an inherent part of the way you're coming to work every day. It is a culture that people need to imbibe and live through. So, I mean, but then the sustainability team is responsible for driving that cultural change. But a lot of collaboration goes in, especially within Johnson Controls. I mean, I keep working with the general managers of different businesses to always have this sustainability tick mark in their business decisions. So yes, it is a lot more collaboration, and it is not that difficult to be done, to be honest.
And what do you think it needs to be done in order to promote that sort of culture, in order to get buy-in from everyone within the organization? Because, for example, maybe there's some departments that might think, yeah, this sustainability part is very good, but it's cost, it's an extra cost and might make our products more pricey and put us in disadvantage compared to the competition. How do you promote
Absolutely.
that?
And this is a struggle that we faced initially in the first few years when we started this journey as well, because everything was looked at from a cost perspective. There are still, for every initiative that we drive, there has to be a business case around it. But the sense of sustainability being a long journey rather than a short transactional interaction has settled in the leadership of the organization. And to be honest, it gets driven from the top leader itself. I mean, if the CEO and the board of the organization has that long-term vision that the company has to take certain decisions in the larger good of the environment, in the larger good of the business itself, because we see sustainability as a business opportunity as well. Maybe the returns will not come tomorrow or maybe the next week, but the returns are there to be had for the next 1 year, 5 year, 10 years. So it is always a financial metric so we have to, every initiative in sustainability that we drive, we have to check the financial tick box as well, which was a little difficult at the beginning, but it is becoming easier because of the realization that sustainability has good financial returns, can have good financial returns, and especially for an organization like Johnson Controls, because we are a manufacturer of a lot of products that go in the built environment, which add to the energy consumption of the built environment. So the more efficient we make these equipment, which is what the demand is in the market as well. People want to buy more efficient equipment. Our customers are reaching out to us, demanding more efficient, sustainable products. So we look at it as a competitive advantage, to be honest, for us.
Right. And we've seen many organizations that they're starting to put a greater focus compared to some years ago on the sustainability aspects, and they start building their sustainability ESG strategies from scratch. They started publishing their sustainability reports, starting getting ESG scorings, and sort of as a voluntary approach. Maybe they were facing the pressure from external stakeholders, investors, consumers, but also we're seeing a growing trend of, for example, stock exchanges around the world creating their own ESG guidelines and frameworks, and also some regulators introducing mandatory ESG sustainability disclosure requirements for publicly listed companies. What would be your advice for other large organizations that are starting, or maybe they already had some sustainability activity or initiatives in the past, but they did not have such a great focus as in recent years? What would be your advice for how to advance the sustainability departments or their strategy?
So, I mean, I've mentioned this in our discussion in the last 20 odd minutes. It is very important for these organizations to not just look at ESG as a tick in the box just to cover compliance, like you said, because it is mandatory. It's not just a report that you need to dish out every year. It goes way beyond that. It goes on the financial stability of an organization, or the financial attractiveness of an organization, because there are big investors out there in the market who are looking for sustainable organizations that they can put their money on. So my advice would be, take the subject seriously and not just as a tick in the box. develop a proper structure, have the highest leadership, uh, keep a very close eye on this subject. There are certain KPIs, like I said, the leadership has to have the skin in the game, um, to regularly review, monitor, track the sustainability drive of an organization, and then be very precise in the pillars that you want to focus on. Sustainability is a very wide topic. ESG is a very wide topic. You need to drill down and have certain pillars that you want to focus on, dedicate resources to those pillars, and make it an organization-wide concept rather than just one person, the head of sustainability, driving it.
Yeah. And can you tell us, for my last question, can you tell us about some of the initiatives that Johnson Controls is carrying out? What are some of the highlights from your role as of the highlight projects as your role as regional director?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. I link it to something that I see around the world, because Johnson Controls always looks at adapting to the need of the market, and it is somewhat applicable to our own operations as well. You have different technology, different technical innovations coming up in different domains of sustainability. Like I said, sustainability is such a wide topic. For example, you have sustainable aviation fuel. We are talking about in the aviation sector. You're talking about EV cars in the transport sector. You're talking about innovations in agriculture. But these are all very industry specific or application specific kind of innovations. One thing that is common across businesses or across the market is the built environment. Everybody needs an office space. Everybody needs a warehouse to stock uh, material. The manufacturing industry needs factories. So buildings is the constant, or is the common theme between every business that is operating out there in the world. And there is no surprise that buildings contribute close to 40% to the global emissions. So of course, there has to be enough technical advances that need to decarbonize the building sector. And a couple of trends that we see, and which is what we are also adapting to ourselves, is digitalization. We see a building, or anything for that matter, has a lot of separate systems that work in silos. Johnson Controls is trying to bring all of these subsystems together through its digital platform to have machine learning, artificial intelligence run a building efficiently, run a building smarter and healthier. Plus, electrification is a big thing that we are seeing across the world. Most people think of electrification from a transport perspective. We look at electrification from a buildings perspective. When I say electrification, there are still a lot of use of fossil fuel to generate steam and hot water inside the building space. I see it all around in Europe. I mean, you don't see it so much in the Middle East because we don't need heating as such. We need cooling. But in Europe, you need heating for comfort. But UAE also has a lot of hot water requirement. You go to a hotel, you would always need hot water to take a bath. There is a lot of industry in the Middle East as well, which requires steam and hot water. Unfortunately, a lot of this is still coming from fossil fuel fired boilers, which is very carbon intensive. So we see a big trend in electrifying this kind of process by moving towards a technology called heat pump, which we are a pioneer in, which is an electrically operated equipment, which reduces the dependence on fossil fuels, reduces the emissions that are coming from the fossil fuels. And also we have 2,000 plus locations where we are based out of 150 countries. So we have our own offices, factories, warehouses, where we implement these solutions like heat pumps, like digital platforms, and we bring this to our customers as well to decarbonize their operations.
Certainly, it will be necessary, essential to tackle emissions from buildings, as you said, one of the largest greenhouse gas emitters of our current system. We'll have to wrap it up here. Seems that 30 minutes go by pretty quickly. I'd like to thank you, our guest speaker from this week, Rohan Chopra, Regional Director of Sustainability at Johnson Controls. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you for having me, Ignacy.